Hello, welcome back to Beauty Bee and to a video on one shadow looks. Now in the beauty community, I think that the conversation around one shadow looks tends to focus on one very specific type of one shadow look, and we'll be covering that today too, but it is this quite shimmery shade that you'll put all over your lid. It's usually pretty mid-toned. You blend it up into your crease. I think that Emily Noel did a video several years ago that really covered those kinds of looks quite well, and I will be sure to link that down in the description below for anyone who's never seen it before. In this video though, I want to talk about three other kinds of one shadow looks that I personally find myself doing, and some of my favorite shades to do them with. So let's actually start with the standard YouTube one shadow look, the shimmery mid-tone color. Now I'm a quite fair-skinned person who has pretty cool undertones, and that definitely plays into the shades that I tend to choose for these one shadow looks. So let's just look at a couple of my favorite shades for this. Sorry, there's a giant mirror on this palette and I'm afraid of blinding you. This is the Profusion Glam palette, and the shades specifically we're going to be looking at are Superstar and Recharge. Superstar is a gold that almost has a bit of green to it. It's a very pretty shade. And then Superstar is your pretty standard rose gold. They're also surprisingly nice quality considering that I got this palette for I think $6. I think you'll see throughout this section, I think there are two more shades to show, that these colors tend to be of a pretty similar depth and a pretty similar level of shine too. The next shade is in a very similar vein. This is from NYX from their Ultimate Edit palette in Ash, and it is this shade, which I think looks quite different in the palette from how it looks swatched. I don't know if it's just the combination of other colors or what, but let's give it a swatch. It's this quite ashy, cool-toned taupe, and this is probably my single favorite one shadow look to wear. I do this quite often. And the final shade that we're going to be talking about in this category is from my Wet n Wild 32 pan palette. It is this silvery shade. I think you can tell that I like this color. It's the only one that looks particularly used in this palette. And again, this is pretty cool toned, but it has quite a bit of purple to it. I don't think it looks quite as obvious in the palette because everything else is so colorful, but it is a purpley silver. So I think you can see that for this type of one shadow look, I definitely have a type. I like neutrals, I like metallics. These are all pretty similar in depth, and I find them all really easy and really flattering. Oftentimes when I'm wearing a brighter lip, say a red or a bright pink, these are the kinds of shades that I will reach for because they don't overwhelm my face. That I'm balancing out my features. I don't quite feel right if I have a lot of makeup on one part of my face and none on the other without being too much. A bright lip and bright cheeks and bright eyes altogether can be quite overwhelming. Another type of single shadow look that I quite often do is just to cancel out the veining around my eyes and maybe give it a little bit of extra depth. Now, I think we will just start with the most basic shade you could think of for this, which is this cream shade from my Wet n Wild Rosé in the Air palette. It's the Modern Renaissance dupe. Now I'm going to give quite a full-on swatch of this, but in general, I mean, I don't even know if you'll be able to see that because it is quite a similar shade to my skin tone, but that's what I'm looking for. I just want to cover up the blue around my eyes. Oftentimes I'll do this if I am wearing liner because personally I need to have eyeshadow primer with liner because I don't know, my eyelids like to eat everything, and this helps to both lock down that primer and keep it from feeling tacky or just weird and gross on my face throughout the day. as well, and it also helps to just brighten the area, cancel out any veins or redness that might be on my lids. I'll also do this with, I'll do something very similar with some quite light colors. For example, one of my favorite shades to do this with is this peach from my NYX Ultimate Utopia palette. Now clearly this is going to give a very different effect than the cream does because it is deeper than my skin tone and a little bit colorful. I have a hard time calling peach a colorful shade, but you know, it does add some orange to my lid. When applied pretty sheerly, I usually use this brush, which is the sort of standard eyeshadow brush shape, but much larger and a little bit more fluffy. I find that this gives you an effect that's very similar to the Glossier liquid shadows. I can't think of the name of them, but I will annotate it. That sheer, really matte, but very pretty, just wash of color. And it's not $18 or whatever ridiculous price Glossier charges. So that's really fun. On the more cool tone side, I like to do the same with this light purple from the Rose in the Air palette again. Give you a swatch of that. I will also, especially with this shade, sometimes line underneath my eyes with a little smudger brush like this, and it just gives me a little bit more depth. I think it brings out the color of my eyes a little bit more. Now for what we'll call the accent look. In this, we won't be putting anything over most of the lid, but just highlighting effectively a couple of little key areas to brighten up the face or bring more interest to the eyes. The most common way I do this is with this Super Shock shadow. It's a glitter in the shade Ladybird. This is one of the ultra glitter formulas. Is that I will take some on my fingertip and pat it in the inner corner, and then I quite often sort of trace along my brow bone, sort of a glitter half cut crease using a little brush like this. This is just a little detail brush. And let me give you a swatch of that shade since that's what we're doing today. I'm gonna need to get the lighting quite right, but I think you can see that that's actually a pretty similar base color to my skin tone, but it has this almost wet shine due to the glitter. It's very pretty, and I think that when I do the look that I just described, it looks like I put a lot more effort into my makeup than I actually did. I'll also do something pretty similar with highlighter. In this case, I'll usually put it in the inner corner and then highlight my brow bone with the same shade. And for this, I like to go with a pretty near white highlight. This particular one is from my Mega Glow highlighting palette and has a little bit of a purple sheen to it. There it is. Now you can see that. I think that this really helps to bring some more structure to my face, bringing out my brow bone as well as brightening the inner corner to make me look a little bit more awake. And finally, for the last kind of one shadow look that I really like is winged liner. Now, if I'm feeling pretty classic, I'll just go in with black, like the shade Noir from my Glam palette. This is actually, again, a surprisingly nice black. It's not the blackest black upon swatch, but it really does apply quite nicely and not too stark on the eye. I also like doing this with a little more colorful shades. I think that it's a really fun way to bring just that tiny little pop of color into especially an otherwise neutral look. And one of my favorite shades to do that with is this deep purple from the NYX Ultimate Utopia palette. I think you can see in comparison that this definitely looks charcoal and this definitely looks purple. And I think an important thing, well, that was a bad swatch. I think an important thing to keep in mind when choosing these colors is to find a color that looks colorful. Some really dark shades, when you apply them to the eye, will just end up looking dark. You can't really see, say, the purple in them or the blue, green, whatever. Quite similarly, I like to use this blue. The blue in this one also shows up really nicely. And I do get very different looks when I use the blue versus the purple versus the black. The first three shades that I've used to talk about this liner look are all matte. They definitely don't need to be. For a good example, let's look at the Wet n Wild 32 pan palette again. And specifically, we're going to look at this, what looks to be just a teal in the pan, and on it, and in the finger swatch, I think you can tell that it's a teal with a little bit of a brown duochrome flip. This is also a really pretty liner shade. All right, so I planned for this to be a really quick video, but I've apparently been talking for the past 25 minutes. Hopefully I can edit this down to something a bit shorter. If I haven't, and really if I have too, thank you for sticking through it. I really hope you enjoyed it and or it was helpful, and I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing if it was. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!